From a virtual living room in South Africa, you are listening to What the Relationship with your host, Candice,
Nsako,
and our extra special guest host for the day,
KG.
Yes, we have another male for another week. I know it'd be like that. So, if you're looking for a podcast that has intelligent, funny, interesting people who share, unconventional advice on conventional relationship topics, we're hoping we will make a great pair. Today, we are talking about masculinity, and we are all aware of what masculinity is in our lives. But are we aware of it in our relationships? Toxic masculinity in particular, as it reads, is a term that encourages the need to be a man, i.e. a man who's defined by the stereotypical ideas of a patriarchal society. While many men tend to take pride in the macho of being a man, they secretly are victimized in the process, which in turn creates a toxic relationship with their families, co-workers, and even their partners. And obviously we brought a man on this topic because, me and Nsako always roast men. So he might be our punching bag, but he's also going to be our anchor on this topic. KG, how do you feel about toxic masculinity? How do you feel about masculinity?
I feel nervous about the show because now I know I'm going to get roasted. But this topic is very where do I even begin? It's one of those things that is so perverse. It's everywhere. It literally is in every part of society, right? And I mean, even when I sit with my boys, I see it playing out not only from their side, but also in my own behavior. And I'm so glad that I happen to have become aware of it, right? And aware of myself. And I'm in the process now of trying to redress some of those sort of toxic parts of my masculine identity. But it scares me. It scares me because on the one spectrum, it can be incredibly violent. It can be incredibly poisonous. But I guess masculinity, I suppose not the toxic part of it, can also in very many ways be very protective and bring positivity to the world. But from a toxic perspective, it scares me. It scares me because it's got the potential to do so much damage on a personal level, but also on a much wider and broader level.
I think we've left that potential stage. It's doing all of those things.
God damn, girl, the show has just started. You can't just start shooting. Wow. Okay. Let me get ready for it.
I'm sorry. No, I'm so sorry. The thing is, when you said the word potential, I think it kind of made me feel no, it's very much in here. But I think the one thing I want to learn from you, and I think I want to take a backseat from bashing men. Just joking. I think I want to learn how this thing actually manifests into relationships, because I don't think I fully understand toxic and fragile masculinity as yet, and I don't know the difference between the two. But for me, I know when something is unfair, then some sort of toxic masculinity is involved there. When I feel like this is actually unfair because, when a man cheats, it's okay. It's nah, the sky is blue. So of course he cheated. But when a woman cheats, it's you are a hoe, you are a wench, you are a whatever they want to call it. So I think that's where it starts. It's the little things, when a woman does something, it's okay, or when a man does something, it's okay, but when a woman does it, it's suddenly not because she doesn't have a schlong.
Right.
Yeah, I mean,
damn.
Were you gonna say something, Candice? Go ahead.
I can't agree with Nsako there. I think there is a.
I need a drink too.
I think there's I don't know, men get a hall pass on a lot of things. They get a hall pass on accountability and responsibility, but they also get a hall pass on sexual liberation. I've never ever been able to have an open conversation about my sexual liberation without ever being body shamed or called out for it. But men, you guys have a body count. You can even maybe have a trophy. You might even win an Oscar. I don't even know. But it's just, I don't know. I think it's just, it's bizarre. It is bizarre.
Dude, when you get asked about your body count, now you have to do bod mass because now you're like, okay, cool, I need to divide by 3 minus 4 and then like do fractions there and make
For
sure
the record, my
there's a
body count
point
isn't that high,
something.
right?
And my thing is like when you look, a man's body count, guys, could be at 6. Like I remember meeting the guy where I asked him, his body count was sitting at like 170 something. Where now in Joburg?
Yeah, let's just say that number in itself is not necessarily a high number. I've been in situations where I've been with guys or I know friends who have had 100 in a year. So body counts are there is no pride in it. I'm just sort of saying that that's not necessarily the biggest number. Yo, hi.
Please call 911. Please call Department of Health. You're telling me they're men who slept with more than 100 people in a year?
Yeah, without a doubt.
Without a doubt.
Look, I can't even defend it. I think like we're way past the time where I could even try to defend it because the truth is it is grossly unfair. I think we all know that that's the case. So there's nothing I can say on that. What I can say though is that a lot of that behavior from a male perspective is our attempt at validating ourselves as human beings. It's just people, I think, right? And I suppose in that social environment that we're in, that circle, whether it's just friends or it's the world at large, there was a time when those numbers mattered. Amongst guys, it still does. It shouldn't, but it still does. And unfortunately, a lot of our identities are wrapped up in that validation, right? But as guys, when we sit, very often we don't have the quality of conversation we probably should be having. I mean, I speak. One of them, me here, sitting here. I sit in conversations knowing that I'm an engaged man, right? And I'm in conversations where other men are talking about their body count, and I laugh, and I'm like, "Oh my god, dude, really? Oh my," So I entertain it, and I don't think it's a healthy thing, but it definitely is still prevalent. I think what we're struggling with as men is to collectively redefine our masculinity, because whilst there's like efforts on an individual level to try and figure yourself out as just an individual, and then say, okay, as a man, then how do I show up? When we get together, we find ourselves backsliding. More often than not, the collective backslides. That I've seen it happen so much. I always think I think I'm enlightened. I think I'm like woke and stuff, right? But then I find myself with my boys, and then the wokeness goes out the door. Yeah.
I'm sorry. This is such a Ted Bundy thing to even like.
Ted Bundy of all people. My God.
Yes. Do you know why? Do you know why?
What's going on?
Damn,
I watched the documentary yesterday, so it's still very fresh in my mind, guys. It's
okay. So we're the victims of your Netflix watching now. Shut
yes. So why I'm saying it's a very Ted Bundy thing to actually hear the fact that men need their body count to be high to sort of validate themselves. You know what Ted Bundy did?
Yeah.
Like he was sleeping around with hands, killing them. I mean, not as far as killing them, guys, but like, do you get what I mean? The fact that for him, in order for him to find satisfaction in life, he saw women as objects. He saw women as almost conduits for his sexual desires and his addiction to pornography. So I think for me, I the first person that came to mind when you said that was actually Ted Bundy, because I'm just like, okay, you need us to validate you, but you are still toxic to us. Why? That's number one. 2, I really, really, really want to know what's the difference between fragile and toxic masculinity. I feel like there's a very thin line between the two, but there's also a difference. But I just can't find the difference. I can't find the,
I'd actually love to hear what brought about the distinction to begin with. I can kind of understand it at face level that fragile is fragile and toxic is toxic in that sense. Are you juicing up? Oh my God. But okay, wait. I can't. The thing is, I feel as if sometimes we conflate issues. So toxic masculinity, the toxicity we sort of bring to relationship as men sometimes, isn't always necessarily a masculinity issue. It might also just be a personality issue. I think let's also leave room for that. There's just some guys out there who are still working on themselves. So it's not so much because of their masculinity. It's just they got some work to do, right? But I also think that, you see now, let me formulate it. I'll come back with it. It's just I need to digest what I want to do.
Dribbling you.
Should I just say, okay, so
Dribble of life. Yeah, trouble hard. Very.
The fragile masculinity I've experienced in the past is when I don't know why, like, can the Lord release me from these shackles? But or no, I've been released from these shackles. But I used to date like men who weren't like as financially like there as me. Simply because, you know, they had more to give, like emotionally and stuff. I don't know why I had that mindset, like, God help me, why did I do that? And what they used to do is they used
Why
to
did you do
cheat
what in
on me.
particular?
Date men who are less than financially than I am.
Okay. You
That
in
then
that
causes
moment, and this is not, I'm really not shifting blame, but I have to call you out because in doing
No, I
that,
know.
you're contributing to this toxic masculinity because
I
now
was
the
an
men that you have
agent.
dated are the men, hey?
I was an agent. You know, me, I can own up to my age. Hey? I was an agent, and not
Yes,
knowing,
okay.
I
If
did
you own
not
it, it's cool.
know.
As long as you own it. As long as you
No,
own it. Because now
I know as an agent.
but then how do we have this conversation if you know you're an agent, but you still how do I put it?
I'm
Okay,
safe now.
you were
I'm
an
safe now.
agent.
Yeah, I'm safe.
Okay.
When again?
Okay. All right, okay. Let's not go back here. Let's forward. Onward.
Obviously.
Backward never.
But not.
Okay,
Me, I
but
think.
let me ask
Yeah.
this: your come to Jesus moment, or your when it happened. How did you then reframe like the relationships and the men in those relationships, and what did it mean for your relationships going forward? So the chap you're with now, like, if he had presented and didn't have the financial means, didn't necessarily level up at the same level you are, would he have been less of a man? Would you have been okay with it? Because also it's one thing to say I'm aware of it, but when you have to deal with the nitty gritty and you're paying for dinner 3 nights in a row, or whatever the case is, it gets real, right? It hits home. So then what?
The thing is, for me, like, I like people who also know where they are financially and they're not lying to themselves. And I think that's the one thing that I fell for, is the fact that men used to convince themselves that, okay, no, I can really afford it. I can afford it. I'm very expensive.
Hold that
Yes.
thought. What does your very expensive mean? Because
Very
you're
expensive
commoditizing
means
yourself.
if we're going out for sushi, I'm gonna choose Fire Room because I like it. I have a very
Okay.
expensive palate. I've got expensive taste, but that's for me. But now the thing is, men walk into my life and think that they have to supplement for that and they have to do that for me. And I'm like, dog, all I need you to do is just be a good nigga to me, and that's literally it. So the problem with the person I'm with right now, the difference with that is, one, honesty. He's an entrepreneur. So for
Yeah.
me, I'm an entrepreneur too. And I know, Guti, there are really highs financially and then there's some really lows financially. And it's very cyclic. So for me, that puts me at ease because I know, Guti, okay, listen, we're honest with each other. I know, Guti, okay, this is a bad month for me. I'm going to communicate that with you. You may have to pay
Yeah.
for more dinner dates than I do. If I know it's a bad month for you, then I'll do that. I have the means to do it. However, if I'm with someone who's not even trying, and guys, I can't believe I come from there, from people who didn't even try, like didn't even want any sort of future for themselves. They were just chilling, like didn't really do anything or try to even better themselves. I used to be in situations like that, and maybe I blame my younger self for not actually seeing that earlier. But that, whereas if it's an entrepreneur who's working on himself consistently, working on his business consistently, and also getting that cash in from time to time, and sometimes
Yeah.
he has some really high highs, and I've experienced the highs, and the highs are very nice. But now when it's just nice and easy, we're just trying to, I like that. I like the honesty of it, and you also knowing where you stand as a man.
And accepting where you stand as a man.
Exactly. Don't
Yeah.
compete also.
I do say though, again, I'm not trying to shift blame, but I do feel that we need to hold room for a healthy masculinity to exist, right? And I don't think women, and I'm speaking very broadly, and I understand I'm going to be chastised, but in my experience, there is a certain age at which women then start to have, hey, I'm about to say it, I'm going to go there, but the maturity to hold space for that healthy type of masculinity. Largely because as much as we men are socialized a certain way, women have been socialized like the same in many ways, right? So the expectations, for the most part, especially in the younger years, like let's say pre-30s, right? Again, I'm generalizing. I understand that. There's the idea that we live in a hip hop music video, and that a man's role is to like sort of bring bling into your world, and as a result, men commoditize women. And I'm not saying it's healthy. But I'm just saying that there must be room left for the idea that there are agents, and more often than not, I'm not excusing male behavior, but I'm going to put it down here and say we are operating from a place of reaction. We're reactive. So I remember when I used to validate myself, or at least my sense of self-worth came from what I had, right? My relationships with women were largely based on what I was able to do. I mean, I had this idea that once I get to a place where I'm able to give you everything, you have no reason to deny me anything, right? And a lot of men still think like that. The other side to it is that in the event that I had nothing, I didn't feel I had room in your world. And sadly, there were many instances where women, or maybe girls, because also maybe we must make a distinction between boys and men and women and men, right? Women and girls reinforced that thinking. They reinforced that belief of no fault of their own, except that they themselves were socialized in a world that said, if he cannot, he is not enough. He's not worthy. So, I guess we all to blame.
We are all to blame. We are, but I genuinely feel like the responsibility can't be on, because I feel like women are very quick to pick up on when things aren't right, especially being socialized and conditioned, and in particular being oppressed. And so we'll find our ways to fight back at that oppression, right? I think the issue comes here is in terms of like how we're socialized in our relationships to sort of take the toxic masculinity. So, i.e., a man must always win an argument. They must never show emotion. Like that for me, those are the two top things of like toxic masculinity that I have experienced in previous relationships. So I'm like, this man is being very toxic just as a way to be very assertive, because he's either, I don't know, intimidated by the person that I am. So in certain settings, he feels that he needs to use his power to dominate me. And it doesn't necessarily have to always be the assertive power of like, let me rape you or physically abuse you, right? But it's a thing of like, I always have the final say. Even though you don't agree and it doesn't suit you, I always have the final say. I will never even show emotion, and I'll never understand your emotion. So I think now there's a bit of a tension and a I don't know, like being a feminist, now I'm trying to fight, but also love my toxic gent. How do I do that?
Don't.
Hey, okay. I want to ask a question though. When did you decide that his behavior was toxic? And so one of the challenges I have as a man, right, is I'm navigating this very fluid idea of masculinity, especially right now, because it's being challenged not only by society but ourselves. We're also trying to figure out what the hell it is and redefine it. And for example, I know for sure I have no power over anybody. So and as much as I'd like to delude myself into the idea that I can exercise some sort of power, I literally cannot. Maybe physically to a person, whether male or female, who might be slightly weaker than me, I could, right? But I'm not even entertaining that conversation. So just because I know that outside of sort of physical domination of a person, I don't have any other power over anybody, I struggle to understand how I could exercise a power I don't believe myself to innately have. And so for example, when I'm in an argument, I'm not arguing because I'm operating from a place of male privilege. It is because the thing that I'm standing for, I firmly believe, right? And so I will naturally, the same way that you do the same thing, I will assert myself and I will fight as hard as I can for that particular thing. And I find myself observing myself thinking, when am I going too far? Like, and so when you said that, I think I got triggered a little bit, because I was like, I mean, I get it that I have to carry my masculinity differently, but I also still want to be able to still be, if that makes sense.
But I think there's a difference with the arguing point, right? I think there's a difference in you can have an opinion on something, I can have an opinion on something, but I think it becomes toxic when you go out of your way to try and defeat me in my point. So you're trying to basically invalidate how I feel, also invalidate my thinking capacity, and then you go an extra way, or an extra mile rather, to prove that point. I think that for me was something that I was like, it's a bit toxic, because every argument, no matter how big or small, you have to really just find a way to invalidate me, and that's not cool. And then maybe I should add another point in within toxic masculinity that I've experienced in relationships. I feel like toxic men are more prone to anger and violence, especially in just how they communicate, right? So the raising of your voice, your deliberate intention of maybe saying disrespectful things,
or saying something that's deliberately going to hurt you. You know exactly that this is going to trigger her, and I'm going to send her over the edge.
Yeah.
And then when she gets over the edge, I'm going to blame her for acting like that, so that she becomes the problem now for being the angry woman and the hormonal woman.
It's like men have this playbook. I don't know if you guys go to men's conference and then you're like, okay, yes.
It was fake. Candace, for me, that's when I knew men were a problem.
Like, why?
They created a fake men's conference for Valentine's Day because they didn't want to participate. Guys, do you understand what we have right here? Like, do you understand the problem we have? No, like for real.
I'm inclined to ask what is fundamentally wrong with men's conference and its fakeness, because I found it quite hilarious. But I mean,
doesn't exist.
We have seminars. We have micro seminars because we're social distancing right now. We will return to men's conference. Where? We don't tell you because we are together. We are communing together as men and helping each other as men.
You see, this sounds like the plot of Ingleba.
Yeah.
That's of that movie Ingleba. I wonder when there's a secret location, men only.
Now you're like, okay, we see you.
Can I ask Candice, how much of your lived experience with that dude was like, how much of it was again personality and how much of it was as the byproduct of sort of masculine identity? I mean, what if you'd had a similar experience with a female, what would we have called it then? Just because sometimes I don't know when to accredit it to or attribute it to toxic masculinity and to just really bad personalities.
I mean, I guess it could be a version of both, but I think when I did call him out on it, he said, well, that's how his dad behaves, and that's how he's meant to behave in relationships. So I think it's that conditioning thing of, I see what's being done at home. I see how my dad speaks to my mom. I see how things are always in his capacity. I see how my mom stays at home and my dad provides. I mean, at some point, I think when I was finishing my third year, he was even like, yeah, I think now you don't have to do your honors. You can just, I'll get a house for us. You can just stay at home.
I got you, baby. Got you.
No. Not in this world. I cannot. I'm not for it. I'm not for it. And I think
exactly what's gonna do the things, man.
Sure, he can do it, but just not for me. Because I unfortunately, my form of submissiveness in love isn't where I am putting myself or putting my career on the back end or pausing it just because it makes him feel uncomfortable. He had certain moments where he was like, the way you study, the way you work, the way you go and do these speaking engagements makes me uncomfortable. And I was like, how is it that my work, my identity, my personality makes you uncomfortable? Surely as my partner, you should be supportive of it. And I think that's when I realized that this man is, I don't know. Yes, he's a great guy. Personality-wise, he's a great guy. But I think he's been conditioned to be with women that submit. And submit means I will bow down to you and not be on the same or higher level as you. Yeah. And for me, I just couldn't do it. I genuinely couldn't do it.
The only thing I'm submitting is my honest assignments, guys. Like, please, don't expect much from me. Hey? I'm really, this year I'm doing my honors. That's the only thing I'm submitting on my assignments, my exams, the whole submission thing. I realized that you give up so much. My contracts, my campaigns, that's the only thing I'm submitting, Cha. I realized that, and guys, I'm so sorry. This is going to sound so problematic because the thing is, I was in one, so I know the dynamics of it, but there's actually nothing more enforcing of toxic masculinity than transactional relationships. I say what I said. If you're going to come for me, my Twitter name is @_Mhlanga. Come for me. The thing is, guys, about transactional relationships, right? is you get into a relationship with someone and say, okay, listen, you want sex from me, right? Because I got that walk.
Yeah.
You want to give me money for that, right? So cool. And you want to give me nice things. You want to pay my bills. You want to take me out on holidays and stuff. Just granted that I have to give you sex. Like it's like a must. I have a serious problem with that because now it's almost like you can be strong armed into things, right? And a man can say, nah, but because I gave you this money, because I did these things, you have to sleep with me. I feel like it's almost like a dungeon for certain things to happen. This sounds really, like, guys, it sounds really bad, but like, just hear me out, ne? Like, I'm just, like, if I say it in my language, then maybe it'll like make sense a little bit. But what I'm trying to say is you sort of like allow spaces. It's almost like fertile ground for something bad to happen with transactional relationships. And I've noticed that some of them women genuinely rely on them because if he's not paying rent, if I don't sleep with him, he's not paying rent and I can't put a roof on my head. So now it becomes an obligation. Like it almost takes away that sense of ownership from you and you're placing that into the man. And then we expect toxic masculinity to suddenly end. But it exists there more often than not.
I think KG, I mean, you're the one who had a whole TED talk on masculinity. I don't know. I'm on the fence on Nsako's point because what if a woman feels empowered or it's her agency or her choice to engage in transactional relationships to a point where it's not toxic. She's able to control them in which, yes, I'll give that WAP. I'm responsible in giving that WAP because I always get STD checks, but I'm getting things out of it in return. Let's just consider that, right? There may be some women out there that thrive on transactional relationships. And I feel like that's another episode for another day. I feel with toxic relationships regarding finances, if you're with a partner who is very, very head set on controlling your finances, what do we think about that?
You're not touching my money. Don't get it twisted. You're not touching. No, like I'm not even playing. Imali, what?
Okay, so here it's interesting that you say that, right? Because my let me speak about what I know, which is my relationship with my fiance. When we met, I couldn't even afford to take her for Magwinyaju. It was rough. It was really, really rough. Although it didn't look like that to the world, but it was bad. It was really bad. And at some point, I had to kind of admit to that and say, okay, this is my situation. So, like, firstly, I here's something to note. In saying that I expected it to leave, right? Because I, like most men, had been told that if you have nothing to bring, and when we say nothing, we're talking about financial means, right? She won't stay. So firstly, I was shocked that she stayed, which then confused me because I didn't know, okay, but now how do I keep her? Because the only thing I knew that would have kept her to begin with, I've told her I don't have, but she's still here. So I lived with in a permanent state of anxiety because my worth in the relationship, by no fault of hers, was always under question from myself. That was the first thing. But we got to a place where we had to then obviously have honest conversations about finances and decide what is my money, what is our money, and what is her money. Yes. And we went through a phase where her money, right, was our money because I had no money. And then things got better and the pools went back to my money, our money, her money, right? And here's the truth, and I'm going to shoot straight from the hip. Then COVID hit and my businesses took a knock. So my money is no longer coming in. She's in a 9 to 5, well, actually more like a 9 to 10 these days, right? PM. And then we went back to that same situation. At all times, it was never a matter of whether I was controlling her money or she was controlling my money. We had our money. And whoever was best suited to handle our money was the person who handled our money. And so for me, I just think that's a more practical approach to how we handle sort of finances in a relationship. It's like one of those things where if I'm the worst player, why should I be the one on the team? Like I'm not going to be the striker. I'll use a soccer analogy, right? If I can't shoot to save my life or score to save my life. So if finances aren't my strong suit, but I'm able to get the money, then in our partnership, she'll handle it. If I just happen by virtue of either skill or experience or whatever, better versed at handling personal finance and handling our money, then we will decide that I will handle our money. But you'll still have your money to go and do whatever you need. But our money in the home has to have, somebody who handles it ultimately. That's my opinion.
What if you're a forex trader? I can't trust forex traders.
I cannot speak for forex traders. I don't know.
Guys, obviously, like KG is a self-aware, woke individual, right? But some of us have, okay, I won't say some of us, but I'll speak to some women or some people in relationships. They have partners where they can't even trust them to make tea and bread. So now,
I can. Their problems are too deep. That water hole is too dark.
I think, okay, I'm going to academify the finances chat, right? Because as women, in particular Black women as well, we face a double burden of having to take care of our relationships and take care of the household, right? So when it comes to finances and men having the final say in terms of the finances of the household, a man could easily make the decision to buy a motorcycle and get himself a motorcycle. But then when it comes to women, we have to put our self-care last. So it has to be take care of the kids, take care of the house, make sure that everything is fine. Okay, have the bills being paid. Okay, then whatever you have left over, maybe you can take care of yourself. But that's usually not the case.
We're in partnership, though. We have a strategic partnership. You're my partner. How is it that I'm making decisions?
Guys, especially. It's unrealistic, especially like from the older generation. Like I think we've seen our mother's money more than we've seen our dad's money. Like let's keep it real. Like when dad gets paid, right? Dad pays the bills that we don't really see. So like the mortgage, the cars, the stuff. Whereas mom's money, you sort of see it. Like you see who's okay. Yeah, this mom has this much money. And moms are more honest about their finances. They say, I have this much of money in my account and this is it, kids. Dads, dog, they don't do that. And for me, like, I've conditioned, like, especially in my relationship, I said, dude, down to the cent. I want to know how much you have, and you're going to know exactly how much I have. I hate surprises like that. I don't like financial surprises where we are fine now, we're planning this holiday, our next thing, there's 300 Rand and 30 cents in your bank account. Dog, like, let's not even do that. Like, for me, I think it's so important. Yeah. I'm not there yet where we have, there's our money. Just a little. You look, if
can I also say
I'll help you, but we're not there. Like we're just trying to also like find our feet in that because it's quite a.
Can I shoot straight from the hip? And it's very judgmental what I'm going to say. I suspect that might be the byproduct of trust issue more than it is sort of an operational relationship management issue, right? Because clearly, or at least what I'm getting from it is, and this is my pseudo-psychology coming in, that you don't trust him, not because of who he is, but because of what he is as a man, right? Enough for you to be able to enter into that level of relationship. And
I disagree.
And you have every right to.
I disagree.
So my thing is this.
These are the statements you need to look out for. You need to look out for these statements. These are the statements you have to look out for. Baby, I want a PS5. Can't you get me a PS5?
No, but that's the thing. Please. Don't. He is better with money than I am. I'm not saying I'm not good with it. I'm like a financial statements, balance sheet type of hand. But he is better. Like he can keep, he can keep 1,000 Rand for 3 weeks, proper, flat. I can keep it for 2 days. But I know within that 2 days, I've spent on things that I know. He just knows how to keep it for long. I just know how to use it. So for me, it's just also finding a balance of, okay, what do we do to make it work? But for now, things have been working nice. If I need help, comes through. If he needs help, I come through and let it be that.
Are you guys cohabitating?
We cut costs.
Do you guys have shared costs? Do you live together?
No, not yet.
Okay, that makes sense. In an environment where you don't live together, it makes absolute sense because, I mean, the hard costs that money goes towards are not, like this. So, But once you move in together, that becomes highly impractical in the sense that there's some shared expenses, I think. And I think you then have to figure out how you're going to handle that, because who then pays for the bond? Who pays for the levies? Who pays for bread? You know, which pocket does it come from, and what's the justification behind that?
And that's going to be very difficult because I come from a household where my mom doesn't pay for bills like that. Like, I think my mom would maybe pay for DSTV, and that's because, you know, she's the one like who's mostly watching the news and stuff. But dad pays bond, dad pays school fees, dad pays school uniform, dad pays everything.
So why is it difficult?
No, like for me, like
why would it be difficult?
I come from that, you know, so it's like I can't, or maybe it'll just take time for me to adjust to anything different, because for me that's something that I actually grew up with and I kind of like. I don't know. It sounds
because it's chivalry, right?
It is. It's the patriarchy we subscribe to.
Chivalrous, toxic chivalry.
We know that. No, for real. Like, you know, it's that YouTube channel you hate, but you just subscribe to. Like it's.
Yeah, and you binge.
Yeah, you know, like you're there. So I'm just trying to like find the balance, because also I don't see myself paying for like the mortgage. I will cry.
Okay.
Like
if I was just sitting with gents, I'll be very real with you. I'll be very real with you. Based on the statements, and I'm not judging them, I'm just reflecting what would likely happen if it was guys having this conversation, right? Or we heard what you've said. We would have said that women don't know what they want. 1 minute you want me not to, you want me to provide, but on the other hand, you want to not feel or know that I like. It feels a lot like we're getting mixed messages, right? Mm-hmm. And maybe a part of it is the fact that there's an ultra focus on masculinity and not the relations. So it's like, you're a feminist, I'm masculine, whatever. You know, these two sort of binary spaces that exist, but these dichotomies, right? But we find ourselves in relation. And whatever the hell we are outside of that, at the end of the day, what makes us work together is our ability to relate, right? And we're spending so much time trying to define and refine ourselves outside of the units that is the relationship, that we come out really, really great or really well defined, but we enter into relationships that are dysfunctional. They don't work. They're impractical because we're operating out of that environment. We're doing our analysis, our studies, our whatever outside of the. Yo, man, I think we need to spend more time figuring out how we better relate, actually, right? And each of us, as in each of the genders, has to go and do the work to improve themselves. And maybe men's conference is not a bad idea. Maybe we'll have some panelists that are female, which will be great. But the point is, maybe it's not a bad idea, so that we do our work, right? So that also, as we build masculinity, we don't build masculinity as a reaction to feminist agenda. And I use the word agenda knowing that I'm going to get killed.
Yes.
Wait, am I putting it right? Yes. Like, my goodness. Okay, this is like.
No, personally, you said everything. Me, I'm quiet, guys. I'll just listen.
Wow, wisdom for a difference. Oh my goodness, this is crazy. Okay,
I'll just listen.
Tell me, what are the subtle ways an individual must, like the subtle signs rather, an individual must look out for in toxic masculinity in a relationship? Because the reality is that all three of us are likely to be aware and knowledgeable, and we are aware that we've been conditioned and we're unlearning our you know, toxicness. Because I can acknowledge that in certain instances, I've had chats with Miles where I'm like, you know what, I think I'm not going to take your surname, but our children must have our surname. And he's like, but why must our children have my surname? Why can't they have both our surnames? I'm like, no, because I know they should have your surname. I've had those moments where I'm like, wait, but let me unlearn this as well. You know, so I think, what are the signs one must look for in a toxic masculinity relationship?
See, for Titikama, yay. I'm scared of this one.
I will say one of the first signs, especially early on in the relationship, is misrepresenting the truth. So lying. Hey, when you say misrepresenting the truth, it sounds so sexy.
Yes.
But just lying.
Lying.
Lying. Maga, you're very right, girl. Um, a person who isn't willing to show you who they are probably has not accepted themselves at that point. And what is likely to happen is that that guy is going to try so hard to sell you an idea, and he's going to fiercely protect the idea that he's going to sell to you. So you can imagine already just that sentence, that the number of sort of ways that that will manifest that are so unhealthy, whether it is going to be making bad financial decisions to look like he is this idea that he's selling to you, because obviously he's not being real, right? Like we were saying earlier. Or it'll be him lying about things that you then find out 15, 20, 30 years later, or 10 years later, or 10 months later, right? But that have real impacts in your guys' lives. I think, just off the top of my head, that's one of the first things to be aware of. And I'm reflecting on my own, who I was when it was at its worst. I'm not saying I've completely healed. I'm trying to do the work to heal myself, and maybe we'll speak about part of that journey as well, because a lot of it has to do with going back to my boy child and saying, "Yo, man, you're sharp, you're enough, you're grand." And it's actual work. It's proper work. It's like there's some exercise and things that you have to do, because there are a lot of young men who are broken that have become adults, right? And those adults are still broken, and they're making decisions from the broken places of the boy inside. And so, in as much as toxic masculinity is such a bad thing, sorry, I'm going on, I know, it isn't. It's more often than not the result of just assholes. You'll censor me, sorry, but more so.
This is podcast. You can say what you want.
Love it. But more so the byproduct of broken souls and broken bits, and we need to help ourselves firstly, and for those that are further down the journey, we need to help other men who aren't necessarily seeing that they're broken, because broken, hearts break, cut the hands that try to put them back together, and so they'll enter into relationships with other people, and they will cut them and they will hurt them, and then this cycle will just perpetuate on and on, at different levels of toxicity, I guess.
It just mind boggles me, because women have probably gone through the worst breakups that probably should have destroyed them. But these are the queens that, and I'm talking about something like last year, guys, I went through the worst breakup. Candace was there. The worst breakup in the world, where I found out my partner was having a child. And on date night, he was at the hospital.
You clearly need to listen to our podcast,
guys. No, for real. Like, yo, but
I'm going back to those episodes. I need to listen.
No, like, yo, guys, it was really bad. And, when I look at him, and, the reason why I forgave him was because I realized with his childhood, this person had to raise himself. His parents, like, just kind of abandoned him, kind of just, like, let him do him. He was raised by the streets, and kind of found himself in his career, but, like, was never guided.
Yes.
Was never given that guidance, was never given the affirmation, was never given that yes from you. And guys, as much as, and it sounds really insensitive, because I have a very active dad in my life, right? But there's something that happens, and there's a disconnect that happens when you don't get that yes from your dad. Like, and men are the first people, our fathers are the first people who teach us about toxic, fragile, positive, negative, neutral masculinity, all types of, you learn that from your dad. So for me, like, I actually realized I forgave it because he never got any of that. He never got the basic childhood of being loved, being given the affirmation. So I think when you said, Guti, it's time to work on ourselves, like speaking like for men, where do you start as a man? Because women, we heal. 2 months later, we have 3 degrees, 4 houses, and 7 cars. Women from a woman's post.
Girl, let me first say that too does not make you healed. The 4 degrees and 5 houses does not.
But we take time away, though. We take time, we figure out ourselves, we self-care, we date ourselves, we love ourselves, we get into our favorite hobbies, we watch our favorite shows, we buy sex toys, we do everything for us.
Where do we begin? Yeah, no. This needs one of those.
Drink. What way to
This
drink?
is water, guys. This is water. I'm lenting.
Is it though?
Oh, can I get lent?
It is.
Oh, yeah, it is.
You know, when you were talking, man, there's this, I remember, I think I read this or heard it somewhere, and I thought it was so beautiful. And it was said in passing, if I remember correctly. But it was something to the effect that, you know, there are a lot of men who grew up but were never raised. And the unfortunate result of that is the world we're living in now, where women are far more emotionally evolved than men are, generally speaking. And it isn't to say that you guys are perfect, of course we know that, but it is to say that the fact that you even interrogate the conversations that you need to, and you go to the place, that very act, the fact that you are aware of the fact that there's work to be done, is the evidence of how far evolved you are. Where do we begin? I can only speak to what I know, which is conversation. Those that have got the light, the burden of that is that you have to shine it. You have to find a way to have the conversations with friends, with brothers, with uncles. I'm more of the inclination that, you know, the older generation that came before us is too far gone. And maybe I'm being lazy in that sense, and I'm not really willing to do the work that needs to be done. And I feel like the work has to go down, that the generations that come after us don't relive, you know, our reality and our fuck-ups, essentially. So it's conversation, and I have to model for my nephews and nieces, and because I don't have kids of my own, but I feel like I've got gang loads of kids. Like I have to model a better me first, so a better being, a better human being, a better KG, and then ultimately, by virtue of being in a world where there are men and women, and the relationship between the two, model a better masculine character or ideal, and hope that they too pick it up and they're like, yo, he did well here, but he could have improved here, could have done better here, and they do better going forward. But we just have to be better beings, man. Damn.
My question is, if I'm going on a first date, do I ask a gent to be like, so what work are you doing to be a better gent? Because
what are you trying to tell us?
That's like the first conversation.
That campaign of hashtag do better gents, I'm so tired of it, right? But is it necessary for me? Do you think men would get offended if I had to ask, what work is it that you're doing to be better? Because I find sometimes they're not just
as you said that, Leanne downstairs could kind of hear what you were asking, and she's like, yes, they would be. I'm because apparently our egos are wounded, would be wounded.
Yeah, they would. Because you're also insinuating that, you know, there's something wrong with him. And remember, men want to, like at the first date, they're trying to, you know, spread their wings and be peacocks. So once you say, "But actually, that part of your wing is not really good. What are you doing to work on spreading your wings even more?" It makes sense why their egos would be bruised.
I would argue that you should ask the question. And in the event that that person you're asking that question reacts that way, they clearly have not gotten to a place where they can interrogate these things. So why are you wasting your time? Also, it's such a great, it's a what do they call it? An icebreaker. You know, now you can talk about things. So what are you doing to improve yourself? Because a person who assumes that there's nothing to improve, do you want to be the person like that? I never. There's nothing to improve. Nothing at all. Nothing. Because I'm not saying you're a caca. I'm saying that you're not even prescribing which areas they improve in themselves. They should know what they are. You know, so I say ask that question. In fact, normalize it. Let that be the first question that women ask. Instead of, so what do you do for a living? It should be, so what are you doing to improve who you are? To improve yourself, you know?
I like
how amazing
that person will never go out of style. I'm sorry. Like, because I'm tempted with it tonight's conversation, or maybe tomorrow night, got dinner, I'll be like, hey, Petsu, like, you know, well, this time, you know, what work are we doing to improve ourselves? And I can share the work that I'm doing to improve myself, because that's a daily thing. So I feel like even in relationships, like it's like a mental health check-in almost, to say, how are you doing? And if you're not doing okay, what are you doing about it to get better? So,
right?
You know, you've changed a lot of dinner conversations today. It's gonna be lit. It's gonna be
I'm gonna be at all the dinner tables, just essentially.
You
And I
just
think, you
shook
know
them.
what, it actually, I took for granted, and maybe I'm just anal that way, and I know it used to annoy the hell out of Leanne. Well, like having this thing, PDP, like a personal development plan, right? And I assume that for the most part, well, not actually, I can't even say that. I know that some of us do have this. So what I had always assumed was that if we enter into a relationship, you're on your journey, I'm on my journey. And as you're going on your journey, we are sharing, this path. But I would like to believe, and I have this idea that, and it's stupid, please humor me, right? It's a love legacy. And the legacy of our love will be that having walked this journey together, my contribution to your life was to help you improve your own journey that you had started on, and yours was the same. And so for that to even exist, I'd have to be aware of what it is that you're working on, which means you'd have to be aware of it because you have to communicate it to me. So whether it's your academic progress, whether it's your financial, whatever it might be, I'll be aware of it. And once a while, every month, we sit down and we have a conversation. So how's things going? How can I be of value? And maybe my being of value is to just chip out, like give you some space to do what you got to do. But the point is, I'm aware of it and you're aware of mine. And where we can collaborate, we're collaborating. So there's a lot of things we didn't learn about the operations of relationship, I think. And that's the unfortunate bit, that we're now finding ourselves in these relationships, but we don't know how to operate them. We're driving these cars. And although the mags are nice, everything together, it doesn't necessarily work. And our co-piloting is really kind of leaves a lot to be desired rather.
I think, yeah, the point is that we just want to be in relationships for the sake of being relationships. So once we're in there, we're like, so
Why am I
where's the
here?
stop button?
Who are
How
you?
do I manage the air conditioning? Where's the hooter? Where's the indicator? And I think that's really important. It's what I said last week. I think with relationships, there goes a lot of work into the mental health check-in, not only for yourself, but also for your partner as well. And I think it can be too much of a burden if you're expected to do the mental health check-in constantly, and especially if your partner's not willing to. And that can sometimes be a clash. And I think that's the issue with toxic men at some times, is that they're not even willing to dip their toe in the pool to check how they're doing and how it is that they are.
They don't know they have to begin with.
So now
And then when
imagine,
they find out, maybe let's also be aware of this, right?
yeah.
When some of us, when we do find out, because it's something we've never done before, we're terrified. And whilst we might be the biggest, bulky, whatever, right? This is internal work, and that's the scariest, because there's no one there to catch us except us. So we are terrified. We don't know how to do it. We're also ashamed because, God, I should have probably done it. And so that also creates a level of complexity in terms of how do you handle. It's almost like bringing a child into the light who's seeing for the first time. They're going to be thrown. They're going to be confused, and it goes a long way when there's someone there to say, "This is what this means. This is what that means. Take your time." And there's a level of compassion that's required with that. It doesn't excuse nonsense, though. It doesn't mean that you get to be a nonsense person because you're still learning. But if you're showing that you're committed to the process, you just don't know how the process works, then it would be really great if there were people who were allies in that journey and helping us figure it out. Because in my parting shot, just speaking on behalf of men, right? Not that I was appointed, because we didn't have this conversation at the men's conference. There is a sense that we are demonized as men, homogeneously, and we yearn for a time when we are not all seen as monsters, but are seen as a group of people trying to figure a new reality out that we didn't, as in when I say we, as in this generation, didn't create, but are trying to help undo as well. And we are fucking up a lot of the time, but we're trying. And we're asking we need allies, we need help. I don't think we get enough. I don't think we get anything done when we are demonized. I don't think what we intend to do, we achieve by demonizing men. Let's try and figure it out. Help us. Those that care. And those that don't care to, figure it out, we'll deal with them. But there are those who want to be better. So
it just annoys me that in this day and age, and here am I going to be problematic again, I have the patience of a teacher when it comes to teaching about feminism and all of that. It irks me so much when we go on social media and people are just ready to cancel, where there's actually an opportunity to learn. Guys, I'm gonna say this with my entire C-cup chest, but I
Come
feel
on.
like with regards to the Mac G thing, they really there was education that could have been done there.
I disagree.
Genuinely. No, like
I
this is just
disagree.
me.
He's
As in
had a
MacGyver McGee.
He's had a history of abuse and violence towards minority groups. There's a history. If there hasn't been a history and it's been a thing of like, oh, I'm new to this space, but I'm willing to learn, then there's a difference.
But people don't care anymore.
I've come across these fake performative gents who want to just be down for feminism just so that they can get rounds, or just so that, for the sake of things, business continues. Mac G, I'm not even going to give him the time of day in addressing him on my podcast. But what I'm saying is that there's a difference between the commitment and friend, not even an episode later is he not doing the same thing. He's doing the exact
same.
So
excuse my ignorance. What I know is Mac G was cancelled. I didn't know necessarily what had led to it. Anybody willing to just quickly summarize that for me so I'm on the same page as everybody?
He's an abuser. He has a podcast. On the podcast, he said transphobic things about Sivingesi. And, Twitter being Twitter decided, let's fight him on this. Old Mitchell removed his...
I don't know about the abuse. I'm so sorry. I didn't know about that.
And then the next, then he releases a PR statement, right? 2 days after. There's no commitment to wanting to change. There's no willingness to say, I as Mac G am going to put in time in trans or LGBTQIA organizations by doing community service. Just a standard apology PR statement, right? Next episode, here he goes roasting women for being outraged at what he said. That shows to me that there's no willingness to learn. Because if you wanted to learn, you would actually then bring in someone who would hold you accountable on your podcast, and you then interact, you engage critically. But the fact that he's still continuing, even though he had a history of doing this before when he was on another radio station, shows me that he's not willing to learn. And friend, he's the same person that has the data to stream a podcast. What tells you that he can't actually research actual content? I'm
so glad you said that. Do you know why? That is my biggest problem with this movement. We want to call each other feminists, but when it's time to actually teach men, we say go and Google. Why? I need to. We are here to teach. But we're here to educate people. We're here to do that. You can't say you're part of the feminist movement if you're tired. Then take a backseat and retire.
But there's a difference between being
for real
tired of the ignorance, right? So I'm not saying if a man comes to me and he says, tell me about feminism, I'm like, oh, I'm tired. No, I'm willing to have that conversation because he is willing. He's shown the commitment on his part. But if there's a history behind this person who has never shown the willingness and commitment to learning, to be better, and then I'm trying to have a conversation with you and then you attack me, you constantly attack me, use that same energy that you're attacking me to learn about feminism. Why don't you?
Sure. One, he actually had an episode with a transgender woman to actually address those issues. And he said, wow, I'm actually really sorry. I did not even know those were the things. Y'all missed that episode because y'all were still busy with the outrage and creating all these stories, right? Number two, I personally did not know about the abuse part of it. I said, when it comes to transphobia, homophobia, and all of that, there's a lot of education that needs to be done. Guys, the reality is it's too early for you to be tired. It's way too early. You can be tired of the ignorance. It's too early. Listen, I'm gonna say probably the whitest thing I've ever said in my life. If Madiba said he was tired of the fighting the struggle, would we be where we are today? No, real talk. If people who actually fought to where we need to be now, if they said they were tired, where would we be?
I agree.
I think it's one.
No, and I'm saying as people, guys, because I'm also an agent of this. Who would say, I say, but I'm so tired of men. And it's like, no, I've labeled myself as a feminist, meaning I will make sure, would say, we are dismantling this thing. No matter how tired, exhausted, frustrated, triggered, or victimized I am, I will do exactly that. And unfortunately for me, I take the teacher role. Dude, if I see you screwing up, I will pull you to the side and say, this is not the way you do it. This is how you do it. This is how you do it. Because you have to have people like that. We have to unlearn, but you have to teach someone to unlearn.
I agree.
I can't.
Feminists wear, sorry, KG, feminists wear different hats, right? So they're feminists that are on the street protesting, and they're feminists that are in policy doing the policy work. They're feminists that are on Twitter twittering. tweeting or whatever. And I think in those spaces, do what you need to do, educate. But I'm just saying from a personal perspective, personally, because my feminism obviously speaks to writing, right? My feminism speaks to podcasts. My feminism speaks to educating young children, fine. But if I'm ever in a situation where I have to sit down with someone who has had the history of abuse, violence, and ignorance, and then when my first response is, are you willing to learn? Are you willing to engage? And they're like, no, I don't, their response is violence, essentially. Then I'm going to take the seat back and say, okay, maybe another feminist will come through and deal with you. But me personally, I'm tired. I'm not going to deal with someone whose thought is violence. That's my point.
I think though it's a missed opportunity. I understand that I've only sort of kind of understood what led to this situation like now, right? But I think it exemplifies what the greater society is, in the sense that Meg G is just but another man, except he had a microphone and a public platform. And some gin. Maybe you should have laid off the gin. But what he said is likely to have been forgotten and not have had any ripple effect anywhere, because it has been said many times by many men in many gatherings, and it has been echoed and laughed about, and it has been nothing. There's been nothing of consequence. Unfortunately for him, of course, he obviously has a public platform. He's has a public profile. But I think the missed opportunity is this: if Meg G is an example of the everyday man, if we were to assume that, right, it means that clearly, and so it's like when you talk about race issues, one of the things that upsets me with that is that there are a lot of things that we do in our silos, and then when somebody slips up, quote unquote, in public and expresses those things that are often said behind closed doors, we're outraged. Oh my God! Listen, what he said, the sentiments that he shared are not new. They're not unique to him, right? And the opportunity to teach was that very moment. It does not mean the outrage is unwarranted. Yes, be upset. And in fact, you're right. You're allowed to be tired. But much like any relationship, you have to ask yourself, do I want the relationship to get to a place where it's healthier? So am I going to be upset, express my anger or upsetness, and then go back to doing the work? Because whilst men have the responsibility of doing the work to fix our nonsense, because we've got a whole lot of that, right? The unfortunate thing is that women, your work is not done either. Your work is to be outraged, to express the outrage, right? But we still have to get back to work. And part of your getting back to work is educate those who are willing to learn. Sometimes even educate the ones that don't know they have to. That's the unfortunate bit. That is, of course, on the premise that the objective is for us to get to a better place. Because cancel culture, I don't believe, is the way to get to where we're trying to get to. Because I don't think it achieves. It's a very short-sighted sort of punitive measure. It doesn't fix what it needs to fix, because there will be another Mac G, and maybe what that person will say will be slightly different, but it will show that the issues are still there, because that Mac G came from that same society.
I think we have to invite.
And I happen to have a relationship with Mac G as well.
I think so too.
Well, I know him.
Okay, let's
and
invite him.
Having worked. Sorry.
I'm saying we're going to invite him.
Okay, so
for me, on
I've
a
worked
serious note, I genuinely want to invite Mac G. Genuinely.
I challenge you ladies to invite him onto this conversation. I want you to invite him, and I want you to roll your eyes. But have the conversation. Have the conversation. And if at the end of that you believe that he's unwilling to hear, he's unwilling to learn or unlearn, then you have every right to make a decision. You would have done what is within your power to try and do the work.
Well, at least now we know next week's episode.
Okay, not okay.
Gee, we're calling you out.
No. Give me some time to prepare, because also I have to think about what this does for my brand personally. There's some reputation things that you have to consider. It's not nice having a minister with you.
I'm gonna say this. I'm gonna say be courageous. What it'll do is it'll say your brand stands for having the conversations that need to be had, whether they're uncomfortable or not.
I'm sorry. I know I'm already tired.
Look, I can't say too much, but there is a campaign that I'm currently working on, which I think would fit best for that conversation to happen. Candace, we were talking about it today. I think, to be honest with you, for me, I want to speak to the most problematic people. And I don't know if this is just the journalist in me. and the Wits journalism school now is coming out. I just want to unpack and sit and talk about these things. And I think for me, after like interviewing a rapist, like you kind of become numb to these things. Like you really want to speak to these people and get into their heads and really understand. And for me, I think as much as what he said was very bad, I think there's really an opportunity here for him to be even a better broadcaster, so that he's also mindful of the things that he says and how those things can come across in the public space. So that whenever someone says, Mike G, no one is shining away, rolling their eyes. In fact, if anything, they're saying that's a perfect example of how to repair your reputation and how to repair you in society and not be cancelled like you're an event under COVID.
Or none of us are perfect. We're all learning. We're all unlearning. God forbid next week I'm on another podcast or I'm on live stream on Insta talking nonsense, and because I still have some unlearning to do, that seeps out into the public domain. Now I'm cancelled. You know, or it's you,
everyone.
or it's you. So let's leave room to fix, to help. We can't be too quick to cancel, guys. Whoa.
So I guess the final talking point or the wrapping point here is that in as much as we don't like toxic masculinity, we need to fight it, right? We shouldn't immediately, like, I don't want to say cancel, but I think if your partner, and this is in relationships in particular, if your partner has the willingness and commitment, these are the key words that KG said, willingness and commitment to learn, to self-check, and also ask themselves, what is it that I'm doing to improve myself? Then there is a chance. But if you're with someone who will always fight you, will always invalidate you, will always look down upon you, will even try and take your money. Yes, I said your money. Then please cut the cameras. Please, just cut the cameras. Because we don't have, I don't know about you, but I don't have time for toxic masculinity in a relationship. KG?
Yeah.
As always, I always look up to you. You're amazing. You're a great guy. Also,
I'm learning too, and I'm learning.
I know.
Don't put me on a pedestal. God forbid I slip.
I'm still waiting for you to take me on a ride on your new Suzuki. When is that happening?
Hey man, hey, got a new one coming, so I'm excited about that. We should have done this. We should have done this in the Suzuki, just driven around with like masks on. Just that would be cool.
Masculinity, guys. We should have. But as always, KG, you're amazing. Continue to do the work that you do. I do know you have a show. So to any of our followers and our listeners, KG has a show. Follow him on Instagrizzle. He's a great guy. He also has a TED Talk. Very, very moving TED Talk. I watched it. Yeah, I saw him in a very different light when he first did his TED Talk. I was like, wow, damn, okay. I thought he was going to do something about comedy, but sure. That's what you give off. You just give off this like lively, bubbly guy, punny jokes. I was like, okay, guy's going to tell us how to be a stand-up comedian. But nah, he told us how to be a stand-up man. In a society that needs champion men. So, yeah.
I'm reposting it. I'm going to take just that clip from the podcast and put it up.
Yes, I see what you did there, sis.
Just, trying to get these brands. Yeah. So, from me, Candace,
Nsako,
and
KG,
we are out. Bye.
Bye, guys.